And so 1243 does two things. The first part of the bill has to do with extradition, and the other part has to do with data privacy, both relating to women's reproductive rights. So the first one basically says that the governor is prohibited from honoring an extradition request from another state if the person in Virginia they're seeking to extradite was participated in or was engaged in conduct which was legal in the Commonwealth of Virginia relating to women's reproductive health at the time that the crime was committed. Basically what this is aimed at is prohibiting, for example, Alabama from extraditing a Virginia doctor back to Alabama because they either gave somebody an abortion or abortion medication or maybe even contraception here in Virginia, and then they went back to, that person maybe went back to Alabama. The paragraph C created some confusion in the Senate, which talked about where the person committed the crime. And the reason the language is in paragraph C, because there's actually language in the United States Constitution that I was not aware of that prohibits a state from restricting extradition for any crime where the person committed the crime in the requesting state. So in other words, if the person committed the crime in Alabama and then fled to Virginia, we're not allowed to restrict extradition of those cases. But if the criminal conduct occurred in Virginia and they try and charge them in Alabama, we can restrict that. And so that's what paragraph C has to do with. And it basically creates a safe harbor for Virginia physicians who might provide services to somebody who comes in from out of state. So that's what the first part of the bill is about. And I think that's very important given the types of threats we're seeing from prosecutors in other parts of this country like Alabama. And I just handed out to you all a couple different articles of some of the things that are going on outside of our state. The second part of the bill amends the Consumer Protection Act of Virginia. And what it does is it creates a cause of action for a Virginia resident, somebody in Virginia, to sue a company that either sells or makes available the reproductive or sexual health information of an individual to a third party without the consumer's consent. And there's a definition there of what reproductive or sexual health information is. I will admit I stole that definition from United States Senator Ron Wyden, who's introduced similar legislation at the federal level, which has not been passed. But it defines the types of different reproductive or sexual health information that could be shared. The reason I've introduced this piece is because there are a lot of companies that are getting information about men and women's personal sexual reproductive health information, mostly women, but it could be men too. To give you some examples, I also passed you some articles a moment ago which shows how Google's location tracking history can be used to track to see who went in and out of an abortion clinic. There are women who keep their menstrual histories in apps online. I could actually show you on my phone right now. I could pull up Google on my phone, and if you all ask me what month in the last 7 years, I'll pull up a month and I can tell you every restaurant that I was in according to Google's location history. And this information is sold. It's used for marketing. It's sold typically on an anonymized basis, but it isn't very hard to take somebody's location history and look at where they sleep every night to figure out who it was. And so this type of information can be used to sort of reverse engineer and figure out ways or individuals that perhaps people might be interested in prosecuting or marketing or whatever. And I just don't think this is information that anybody ought to have a right to. And this is also information which is not protected by HIPAA, because the information you create with your phone as you walk around or you log into these apps or whatever is not information provided to a licensed medical professional. So you don't have any federal medical privacy interest in that. It's not protected by our state statutes on medical privacy. It's all data stuff. And it's also necessary because the Consumer Data Privacy Act that we passed 2 years ago, which, by the way, only the Attorney General can enforce. We can't even enforce any violation of our own data, specifically excludes medical-type data. So I think there's a serious question as to whether or not that Consumer Data Privacy Act even covers this type of data. But the threat for the release and spread of this type of data is real. I passed around several articles now. I think people are starting to become very acutely aware of how much information is out there about themselves. And I think, well, where we eat at restaurants or where we go shopping or whatever is one thing. I don't believe anybody should have the right to sell information about us to show where we're obtaining our what kind of health care we're obtaining or where we're getting it, or whether somebody's choosing to obtain these types of reproductive health care services or sexual health information. I just don't think anybody ought to have the right to get it without our express consent, even if our name is not on it. That's basically what, and this bill would basically disincentivize a company from doing it, because it would create a lawsuit where you could sue them if they sold it or gave it to anybody. That's what that one does.
All right, thank you very much. Questions from members on the committee? Anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and subcommittee members. Lexi White, again with Repro Rising Virginia and the Virginia Reproductive Equity Alliance. We are in support of Senate Bill 1243, which protects the privacy and autonomy of individuals seeking reproductive and sexual health care when these services are legally provided in Virginia. In prohibiting the unauthorized obtaining, disclosing, or dissemination of sensitive information, such as pregnancy status, menstruation, ovulation, and contraceptive use. This bill truly recognizes the importance of maintaining confidentiality in reproductive and sexual health matters and ensures that individuals can access and discuss these services without fear of legal repercussions. For these reasons, we support Senate Bill 1243.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, Josh Hetzer on behalf of the Family Foundation. I just want to address the first part of the bill regarding extradition. It appears that this is without precedent in the code, putting restrictions on the governor's discretion about who to extradite, and it does so by narrowing, singling out only one category of crimes, that involving abortion. We think that's bad policy for a myriad of situations that might arise, and so we would oppose the bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would like to show you here a letter that was published and written in May of 2022, before the Dobbs decision came down. It is signed by over 75 pro-life organizations, making it very clear that under no circumstances, now or in the future, is there any interest of any kind in pursuing legislation that would seek out, punish, or in any way track women, track their pregnancies, track what they do, or seek any kind of extradition, punishment, or criminalization for women who have had abortions. We have been, from the very beginning, aware that women are often manipulated and often the second victims of unscrupulous abortion providers throughout the country, and therefore we have always recognized that it is inappropriate to seek that. So I would put it to you that Senator Surovell's perhaps well-intentioned bill is actually a solution looking for a problem that does not exist. There are no efforts. VSHL most clearly is on this letter, signing it, saying very simply and very straightforwardly, we will continue to oppose legislative and policy initiatives that criminalize women who seek abortions. We will continue to work for initiatives that protect unborn children and policies that provide and strengthen life-affirming resources for abortion-vulnerable women. We call upon all pro-life legislators to stand with us. We ask you to continue to act with love and compassion towards abortion-vulnerable women. We urge you to reject any measure that seeks to criminalize women who have had abortions. That letter I can provide to every one of you, and I will. Let me quickly say this regarding the Alabama situation. Our own Attorney General and our administration have made it clear that they oppose the concept of criminalizing women seeking any punishment or any pursuit of women who are involved in pregnancy decision-making or any of these concerns. See, the Attorney General at our Rally for Life just a week ago made it very, very clear that this administration, at least, would never pursue that. And I can tell you, quite frankly, that if any future administration were to pursue such behavior, we, the pro-life organizations of Virginia, would oppose it. I would also quickly say that you've been all handed out some information from Alabama. I have heard from the National Right to Life Committee Communications Director that the Attorney General of Alabama, about which much of the information you've been handed, suggested that somehow or other, or was quoted, that he would in fact be considering pursuit of women. That he has walked back soundly and clearly. I don't know if any of you as politicians have ever been misquoted by the press, but I certainly have. And I can only tell you that I am sure right now that the Attorney General feels as strongly as every other Attorney General in this country right now who is strongly recognizing that while we may have to deal differently with abortionists who are actually performing abortions, women are not the problem, and we want to provide assistance. So I hope perhaps the Senator and I could work in future on plans to help women, not hurt them.
Delegate Delaney.
Question for the witness who just spoke.
Yes, Delegate.
It sounds like your stated values are rather in line with this piece of legislation, and one key word that did stick out was that this administration. And so I guess my question would be, what is the source of your opposition then, if you feel that what this legislation is seeking to do is in line with those acts which you would like to say that you wouldn't want to see people criminalized, and this bill would go on to ensure that even if it were not this administration, but perhaps a future one, or perhaps if the membership of your organization changed and took a different position, that this would ensure that what you are saying you currently support would in fact be law.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to the gentle lady? The effect that we see within a law like this is that it does do two things. The mentioned earlier that it seems to carve out some kind of special treatment under our current law in Virginia dealing with extradition just for those who perform abortions or participate in the practice of disseminating chemical abortion drugs. My concern, of course, is how we treat women under the law. So I appreciate that you see that there is a camaraderie in there, and I would like to perhaps this year, this is a conversation that we've begun. Perhaps it's something that, if the Senator is willing, we could talk about something that might need to be done that would guarantee ongoing protection for the mothers that we feel is important. Women who seek pregnancy advice need to be carefully guarded, protected, and respected in their decision-making process. But I would put it to all of you on this committee, perhaps this is the year to lay this on the table or PBI it, because it's not ready, as pardon me for sounding a little flip, not ready for prime time, in my estimation, because of those components of the legislation that specifically suggest that somehow or other there's some interest on pursuing women, and there are apps on their phone or other devices now that we have that provide information about our status. No one has any interest in doing that, so maybe we need to go back to the drawing board and make this specific to the problem at hand and not as generic as it appears to be. But I appreciate the Senator being interested in the conversation. Thank you. Is that helpful at all, Delegate? Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Jeff Caruso with the Virginia Catholic Conference. I'll be brief. I just want to speak very briefly to the extradition part of this legislation. So first, I want to be absolutely clear. We stand firmly and unequivocally against extraditing, prosecuting, or criminalizing women who have had abortions. And as Ms. Gans said, numerous pro-life organizations across the country have signed an open letter clearly stating this, and we reiterate this point now. This bill goes way farther, however. It would shield from extradition providers of abortion and others involved, such as doctors. We're not aware of any other provision like this in our extradition law, so the bill has broad and unusual reach. We oppose the broad and unusual nature of this legislation while again reiterating that we stand against extraditing or in any way criminalizing women who have had abortions. Rather than seeking to advance SB 1243, we urge all legislators to instead seek laws that protect mothers and their unborn children from the tragedy of abortion. Thank you for considering our views.
All right, thank you. And Madam Clerk, I understand there was one person online.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have in favor of the bill Teresa Kelly.
Ms. Kelly, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I obviously misfilled out your form because I'm opposed to the bill.
All right, Ms. Collette, I understand there's actually two people online, and
okay,
so we'll start with the person who is in favor of the bill, who signed up in favor, and that's Ms. Kelly.
Me. Yes. Names are similar. Yes. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. I apologize. Again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Teresa Kelly, and I'm from Powhatan, Virginia. When I'm listening to this bill, when it first came out, it sounded like it was, even if somebody did something in another state, that they possibly wouldn't face extradition. But then it sounds like it's gone through a couple of iterations where now, if it's legal in Virginia, they cannot be extradited. And I believe if you're protecting women in this state, why are we not protecting our medical personnel too? So I am in favor of SB 1243, and for all the other reasons that those who are for it, I am also for that. So I ask you all to please recommend to report this bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now Ms. Collette.
Forgive me, Mr. Chair, and forgive me, Ms. Kelly. I apologize for my interruption and prematurity. One of the interesting questions that have arisen under the federal extradition Article 4, Section 2 of the United States Constitution is its application in abortion. This particular bill recognizes that the state of Virginia has joined the Uniform Criminal Extradition Act, but the provisions as they currently stand appear to be inconsistent with your state manual on extradition. And I would join my voice with other opponents that I believe that the bill needs to be amended to exclude women who are seeking reproductive services, but not to exclude those who assist. And I'm thinking particularly of the instance that while I was testifying in front of the House of Representatives on the Child Interstate Abortion Notification Act, that in that instance there was an adult male who impregnated a young female who was a minor. It violated the state statutory laws. She was required to have parental involvement. The mother of the adult male, in order to assist her son in avoiding statutory rape charges, took her to another state and misrepresented herself as the mother of the child, and that state had no parental notice law. So although the clinic was aware that in fact she was not the mother because she could not present ID, that the clinic went forward with the abortion. This law would allow that sort of abuse, and I believe that it should be sent back to committee or laid on the table until it's narrowed to deal only with non-extradition of women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Senator, any additional comments you'd like to make before the committee takes up the bill?
No, I appreciate, I guess the representation that the Society for Human Life, or I think that's who she represents, is not interested in criminalizing women or doctors right now. And I read while she was talking about what the Alabama AG said, but I also want to note that South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, 7 days after Alabama spoke, said, this headline is AP, South Dakota Governor Noem threatens charges for abortion pills. So, this ain't going away. And what this means is that if somebody from some state travels to Virginia to get a prescription, and they travel back, even though the act was committed in Virginia, there could be a conspiracy charge, and somebody in Virginia could be attempted to be extradited for this. And I think there's a real threat, and I don't believe these other states should be using their laws to target people in Virginia for engaging in legal conduct in Virginia. And that's what the safe harbor is. The other piece, the data piece, is a real thing. I don't know if you guys have an Android. If you got an Apple, you've got a little more privacy than us Android users like me. But I'm telling you, it's scary what's in these phones. And I think we need to be a lot more vigilant about what kind of data that can be shared. And I don't think any company, any corporation has any business sharing information about what type of reproductive health care services or what kind of sexual health information people keep in their phones. They have no business sharing that. And this would prevent that from happening as well.
The bill is before the committee.
Right. Substitute motion.
All right, hold on. We got a motion to report and a second. And then I heard a substitute motion stated quickly thereafter.
Senate Bill 1240.
And lots of crosstalk and coughing.
Second her coughing.
But I think there was a second to the motion to PBI. So that allows for debate to 2 minutes. Any debate? Hearing none, please record your vote on the motion. All right, please close the roll. The motion carries by a vote of 5-3.